Welcome to the Men's Healing Network podcast. I'm your host, Vincent Perez. Today's conversation begins with Gregory Flynn, a facilitator who has spent more than 15 years exploring what can happen when men come together with intention, honesty, and a willingness to be changed by one another. Gregory has been facilitating men's work since 2012 and is the founder of Men Connecting, a weekly men's circle that began during the pandemic. Today, he leads men's circles, retreats, and workshops, and serves individuals, teams, and organizations around leadership and culture change. I asked Gregory to invite someone who has influenced his work in his life. He invited Efraín Gutiérrez. Efraín is an artist, facilitator, and strategist working in service of liberation for all. Rooted in queerness and connection, Efraín's creative practice, Divine Fluidity, serves leaders, funders, and families of wealth, inviting people beyond the binaries that keep us performing instead of becoming. That idea, moving beyond performance and toward becoming, takes us somewhere powerful in this conversation. Together, Gregory and Efraín challenge the idea that men need yet another model of masculinity to live up to. Instead, we explore what it might mean to unlearn the rules that have shaped us, reclaim the parts of ourselves we were taught to hide, deepen our connections with one another, and find the freedom to become more fully human. Here's my conversation with Gregory and Efraín. Welcome to the Men's Healing Network podcast. I'm so excited today. I've been looking so forward to this conversation. Gregory, meeting you over these last few months as MHN has gotten off the ground, having you in my home, just meeting you for coffee, going to a conference with you, has really just warmed my heart to know that there are practitioners like you out there with such a sincere approach. Even holding me, I had a sense of vulnerability, and being able to be held very emotionally by another man is such a gift. And so I'm really glad to have you here. And I'm also very excited and curious as to why you invited Efraín. Can you tell us a little bit about that relationship?
Vincent, I just echo everything you said. It's been really great getting to know you and getting to get close to you. I'll leave for the listeners just a little mystery of I'm really touched by the fact that you brought me a flower at that coffee. Yeah, when you invited me to do this, several men's names kind of started filtering up to the top. But one came and just obviously made its way to the very top, and that's Efraín. We have a funny backstory. We met in a professional kind of networking situation 15 years ago, maybe something like that, a long time ago, and then didn't connect for many, many years. And we found our way back together as we were both kind of finding our way in through this work. And I think part of what makes me want to invite you, Efraín, into this conversation is the conversations that we have had around men and masculinity and what does it mean to be a man in the world today. Every single time I get into a conversation with Efraín, I leave feeling a little bit more seen. I get to question assumptions that I've made, and I get these deep insights about the ways in which I, as a man, and then men in general in our culture, have been shaped by culture and by the systems that we live in. Few people put it into as clear an articulation as you do, Efraín. So yeah, I'm really excited about this too. It's going to be really rich.
Thank you.
Efraín, any response to that, or do you want to share anything about your relationship?
I'm just very grateful to Greg for seeing me and for the invitation. I feel similarly. I think that every time I have a conversation with him, I feel like we're like fellow travelers. I feel that with Greg, we're already there. We just meet and start exchanging ideas from the beginning. And it's just been that's when you grow, right? Like when the other person is building from your ideas and you are learning from the ideas of the other person. I feel very much like that with Greg. And I'm in a journey to get my hair longer than him, but every time I see him, I think I won't. It just keeps growing and growing, and mine is curly. So.
I like that competition. Beautiful. Efraín, I'm curious. We'll kind of launch this as you jump into this conversation. I always like to start with the big one is, what does men's healing mean to you?
For me, it comes down to more than going into trying to find a different model of masculinity and centering on like a different archetype of what it means to be a man and trying to get there. A lot of what I come to in terms of my healing is about coming back to that little Efraín that was 7 years old and already had all the wisdom in the world and already was saying, you think I'm feminine? And I had to mask and I had to do a lot of things to survive. Where at the very end, what I'm working towards is to unlearn and come back to that little boy that was being labeled as weak. And all of the labeling, all of the reason why he was being labeled is because he was very brave. So I want to go back to that bravery and that idea of being a better man for me is being more fully who I am, independently of what masculinity is or is not. So it's a very personal journey, and it's at the very end about coming back to being fully human.
Thank you. And I'm hearing fully human, but authentic to like your own unique spirit in that. A few weeks ago, through some somatic work, we were invited to, through Embodied Masculine, we were invited to be with our little boy. And what was fascinating for me in this visualization, I ended up with my back against a tree in a summer sunset, this beautiful sun on the face. And next to me, though, was not just one of me, it was multiple me. There was my 7-year-old on my right, and I had my arm around him. And then on my left, he must have been about 13, but he's holding the 2-year-old me. And we're all just chilling there in the sun and the light. And I realized who was little Vincent at 2 and 4 and 7 and 9, and all of these experiences that shaped me. There was something really beautiful about the many little me's that needed my care, right? Needed my attention. And it was really beautiful to provide that kind of space for them within my own heart. I'm curious, Greg.
That's beautiful.
I'm curious, Gregory, where does that lead you? I mean, with Efraín's, it just sparked this memory in me of just this exercise I did a few weeks ago.
That is gorgeous. And yeah, the way that these different times in our lives, the different kinds of ways we're shaped in different places and different parts of our lives, and different people we've come into contact with. If you asked me the question directly before you asked him, I would have given a really similar answer. And I think part of this is that we come from obviously very different places, different backgrounds, different cultures, different countries even, but there is this thing that we share, which is being shaped as men in a culture that is trying to shape men into a particular kind of way of expressing oneself. There's a way in which the privilege that gets talked about, like male privilege that gets talked about, is true. And it's true if you conform to this particular way of being. If you do not conform to this particular way of being, then many of those privileges are revoked. I feel it for sure in myself. One of the ways that I think about this is like healing is one piece of the work of looking at the wounds of myself and feeling into, because whenever I feel the activation of my body, or I feel the shame that arises in me for certain things, it always has an age. That 7-year-old or the 2-year-old Vincent, or the 13-year-old Vincent that was holding the 2-year-old Vincent, I have my own versions of those, and each of them are also tied to particular ways in which I feel a shame, or I feel some kind of loss in myself, or some kind of, there's no value here, or like the value needs to be proven somehow. And so I think about that piece, and there's healing in that. And then I think about the stuff that has been taken or was cut off, severed, maybe even sometimes violently, sometimes viciously. Don't cry, be a man, grow up, man up, that kind of messaging that comes through. And that, to me, there's a reclaiming, right? You said this, reclaiming self, or maybe coming home. There's healing, and then there's holding. To actually reclaim the full self, the full spectrum of ourselves. That's, I think, my lifelong journey, and the journey that I try to bring into the groups that I lead.
I really like that, healing and holding. Efraín, where does that lead you?
I think what Greg was saying about the fact that we're going to like a similar response, even though we come from different backgrounds and different experiences, is my journey to healing as a man took me very deeply into understanding my queerness and and the idea of being different. And I've been working on what are the gifts of that living as a queer person give you or allow, or in some ways force you to develop. And there is a gentleness to self. There is an ability to hold ambiguity. And there is this returning to self that in my case come from queerness and from my experience, because I was forced to develop them in order to survive. But the capacity to do this is very human. I think what Greg was just saying is it was just trained out of everyone. But these capacities also live inside every man. And it's not necessarily a matter of sexual orientation or gender identity or anything else. It's really a human capacity to hold these things. So it's good for me to be able to get to this place where we're not teaching people how to do something, but we're really just reminding people something that they've forgotten.
You know, there is something as a cisgendered heterosexual man for me in my experience, and most of my relationships being among other cishet men. And then over the past few years, coming across influencers or, you know, like Alok, which have like just opened my mind around what has been severed. So I'm curious about this innate capacity you're saying, right, in all humanity that gets cut in all kinds of ways. Even as we just opened up and started joking about competition, you know, of the length of hair, but I feel like I've been put into lots of competitions which are not healthy. Like that sounds like a very fun, engaging kind of thing. There's the other side of competition, which made me really push myself in like track and field. Like I really wanted, and I was disciplined and I was focused and very eager to be coached and like given the tips and approaches. And so it seems like there are some healthy components around how we are shaped as boys and men, but a whole lot of mess. And I'm curious, how do we like either bounce back? How do we combat that? How do we not let that hit us so hard? How do we stay whole?
We have to run towards it. It exists. We're human. We compare each other. We compete. I don't think that's not going to go away, nor should it go away. It's just a matter of doing it. I don't know how to define it, but more thoughtful and more intentional. I don't want to turn the conversation somewhere else, and under the risk of doing that, I facilitate a lot of spaces that tend to be very like oriented towards equity, and everybody's starts with pronouns and starts with a lot of careful curation of the space, and everybody has to be very careful to speak from the eye, all of the things that we've seen. And what I have found is that in men's spaces, I have found a lot of roughness that is actually very helpful and needed for some people. Like some of these heterosexual cis men, that's not how they're gonna move or get moved. So I actually been like running towards this sense of men sometimes being a little rougher. Some men retreats that I've been to where men just like stand up and say, you shouldn't do that. And why are you saying that? And there is value in that too. It's like everything in life, right? It depends on how it's done and with what intention. So that's kind of what comes to mind when I think about that. Like we have to like run towards the full spectrum of the human experience and trying to stay with it instead of trying to say, don't do this. And I think that's not something that we do to men. We just tell them what not to do. There is not a lot about what to be.
Where does that lead you, Greg?
This is the thing, right? Is like, in some ways, the project we're talking about here is so big. It's so massive, right? Like, how do you change the shaping of men and boys in the world? Which ultimately ends up being, how do you change the shaping of humans? Because so much of our society revolves around patriarchy and the way that we were shaped to be in these boxes. You know, you mentioned Alok. Alok to me is a spiritual teacher. Like I see them and like I hear everything they do, from their comedy to the kind of riffs that they do of just like these, I mean, almost every Instagram reel is a mic drop from them. To me, it highlights the ways in which as cis hetero men, we can look to our queer siblings as folks who actually have carved a pathway. They had to for survival, right? And to actually, like, in order to be able to live freely in some way and fortunately, we live in a world where that needle has moved. I mean, unfortunately, there's been the regression in our culture, but the needle has moved over the course of our lifetimes. And I see lots of potential for it to continue to move. I think that pathway, which is so terrifying in a world in which the way masculinity is so often defined is what you're not, right? Don't be like a woman. And then homosexuality gets folded into that, right? Don't be gay. And that's part of how we get policed as men. We get policed on the playground, and we get policed in our communities, and we get policed in our workplaces, and we get policed in our relationships, and we get policed, like, it just happens in place after place after place. To actually begin to turn ourselves to the discomfort of, like, maybe there's actually something for me to learn about myself here. It doesn't make me gay. It makes me more me. And then even those labels fall away. Like, it's like, it doesn't even matter at a certain point. To be able to walk down that path a little bit and to discover a little bit more of who we are, because Efraín, you're totally right. There's so many ways in which I've had to mask who I actually am in ways that are not dissimilar to the way you did, but the world is set up to keep me from having to actually face that until I'm in some sort of a crisis, right? Which is usually when men find their work, right? Is like their relationship blew up, or their job disappeared, and now they're like, who the hell am I? What's going on?
And the way that I think about this is the same mechanism that's keeping us down, but for cis straight men, it's usually to stay at the top, and for us, it's to survive the bottom. But it's the same. It's like we're in different cells, but we're both in prison.
Same jail. Yeah.
Wow, I feel that, and I feel like the cis het cell is so rigid. Like, and that for me has been some of that releasing of, like, the more I kind of expand my awareness of who's in the world and who's had to hide themselves, right? The more freedom of that learning, the more the learning that comes, the more freedom I feel like I have in my own, like, spiritual sense, but also this, there's something that's leading me to this memory of being in a men's grieving ritual. And there were all this different components where you could kind of, it was almost like a free for all. Like, there was an angry, you can let out a lot of, aggression and, take the bat and beat the couch, or be with other men to be in the, like, I need 4 men to push against me. And I need a physical, like, and I need to wrestle through that. Another space where they're really in consensual touch and kind of like a little cuddle puddle. But for me, thinking about touch among men and getting to that space after my 5th ritual, which was, they're about 5 or 6 hours long, and realizing how much I needed that, how much I missed that. Yeah. And I can look back at my own father's, who was very aggressive, very violent, a lot of addiction issues. I mean, just like a hurricane in the house, right? And all powerful. And then the other side of that balance was so tender when he was sober, so tender that I remember him rubbing my back, or watching TV or something. And he was always had this, this continuous, like, caress at times. And that, like, switching from what felt like extremes to me, but that was in him, and I hadn't really had anything else like that from other men until this grieving ritual, which invited me into that. And I think sometimes, we need held by other men. I mean, not just emotionally or spiritually, but actually physically held.
Platonic touch is a need. Like, it's a human, not just a human need. It's an animal need, right? Like, you look at the way animals, especially other mammals, like, support each other and care for each other. Touch is almost always involved in one way or another. There's very few examples of animals that are out there that are just on their own, who, like, don't have that kind of connected relationality. So I think we oftentimes forget we have animal bodies and we have that need. And touch has become so sexualized in our culture, like the concept of it, that the very idea of like cuddling, that's meant to be a nervous system regulator, which is a massive nervous system regulator. We can only self-regulate so much. We actually need other nervous systems to do that, another physical touch. To between men is considered gay, right? And that has harmed us so much. It has isolated us so much. And, finding our way back to it is so important. And that's why I love that, in the grief rituals that you're referring to, like that's encouraged. It's something that we try to do in the groups that I run. It's something that needs to come back more. It needs to be named explicitly. So I really appreciate you're highlighting it.
Thanks.
That's a tough one for me. Touch with people that are like, that's a hard one for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, I'm still solving it for myself, and how much is me just being conditioned to not, like, when I've been to these gatherings and I see the value of it as a queer man. The first time that I was at a men's retreat and I was like being fully hugged by a random straight cis man, it was powerful. But I don't know. I'm just, that's a personal thing that sometimes is still a little weird.
Well, I mean, isn't that, each finding our own, but there is something about like not exploring at all, right? Of being so confined to not even explore whatever, whether it's touch, whether it's singing, whether it's, like any kind of real expression or emotional expression that gets locked in.
Yep. I really appreciate you bringing it in, Efraín, because it immediately kills the everybody's got to do it one way type of thing, and that isn't true. And I also want to acknowledge there are people who have massive trauma around touch, and so that needs to be something that's taken into account and worked with. We shouldn't just jump in and be like, oh, everybody's cuddle party, let's go, and assume it's going to be an okay thing for everybody. So I really welcome where you're at with it, and if it's something if that's just how it is for you, then that's how it is for you. And if you're on a journey back towards platonic touch, then cool, I'm there with you, So whatever it is, it's all good.
It feels like I'm missing out, but something is like, no.
It makes me wonder about modalities, though. I'm curious, Efraín, are there particular modalities, approaches that you've seen or have you experienced, really? What's really helped you? In terms of, as we're thinking about this journey of men's healing, and, I've been able to uncover here in Washington State a number of different organizations serving boys of men and a lot of different approaches. And so that grieving ritual, Grieving Man is the organization. It's a very kind of outward, expressive, I found, somatic engagement through embodied masculine, which is kind of an internal, a lot of breath work, visualizations, movement, and touch, but with self. My eyes are closed and I actually have a blindfold on and really exploring the internal landscape. And so what has worked? Is it singing together? Is it what have you seen really, support, especially in community settings, right? Or for that matter, your own individual path?
I think for me, what has worked a lot is having one-on-one conversation, very long WhatsApp messages with individuals that independently of their gender are exploring their queerness. That has been really helpful for me.
What does that mean to you, exploring your queerness?
Just questioning what it means to be a woman or a man, or what do we really mean. At some point, I was like, am I a man? I was like, oof, I don't know. Because I remember being at a conference and I remember it was a group of 8 people. It was when they do small group stuff in conferences, and then you have this small group conversation, and it was 6 female identifying people. And there was this older guy and me. Probably the guy is not that much older than me. And he just looked at everyone and he said well, it's just you and me and the ladies. And I was like, you know what? I am not the ladies, but I feel closer to the ladies than to you because of how you just said the ladies. And just being just going deep into that understanding of I am comfortable when I call myself a man because I know what I mean, but thinking what he was thinking when he thought that we had an allegiance just because we both have a penis, I was like, yikes, no. Another example is the straight cis man that I've been having a lot of conversations with. We went to a retreat together. We talked a lot about queerness, and he just stood up at some point and said, God, I finally, I even have a trans man in my groups because he also does social practice group work. And he said, oh my God, like, you just want to be free. It was like me when I was a kid, and I was reprimanded for just being me because I was a little louder and I couldn't sit for hours. And in some ways, I'm not sexually queer, but I feel, I hear you. Like, I also want to be free. You just want to be free. And having those types of conversations is what kind of like comes to the big realizations. And that's kind of what has been helpful to me, just going deeper and deeper and deeper in the not knowing.
There is something there. I just want to be free. I've mentioned before, like I was a dancing kid. I was a dancing boy. And around like middle school, that stopped. Because where I came from, boys did not dance. And if I could like a whole different, I think I could have been a dancer, like literally like a professional, gone on my way and found some kind of what, and I don't even know what it would be, but I feel like I was robbed of it. Like it was taken from me. Shit, now I'm a little angry actually about it. Like, you know,
It's never too late.
No,
it's never too late. Hey,
I have been reclaiming that for sure, but but really coming to that understanding, like I do want it.
Well, there's probably some to grieve there, Vincent. Like, you know, like there's probably some grief in like I felt this, you know, I felt it with theater and walking away from theater, and there's a variety of reasons for it, and I think it's complex as to why it happened, but at the same time, it doesn't matter. Like there's just this grief that's there because of it. And I think that grief is actually an access to a kind of freedom. You already kind of alluded to this earlier in the conversation, but you said to me in a voice memo yesterday something along the lines of, do you know what I'm kind of alluding to?
I don't remember. No, just tell me a little more and then...
So you said something along the lines of, we don't need like a new model of masculinity, right? What we need is for you to be you.
Yeah.
I think this is one of the things that's interesting out there, right? It's like there's all these conversations out there about toxic masculinity, and we need healthy masculinity. And so I think one of the things that happens in especially like kind of the Western white supremacist mind is like, well, that means that's like a model, right? We need to like develop some kind of a like structure. What does that look like? So we need to replace this with that, you know. And if you replace this with that, you're just going to end up with a new sort of dominance. It's a new kind of prison. It's like it's it's just redecorating the prison. Instead of that, freedom would be everybody just gets to be who they are.
Yes.
And then you don't have to worry about whether or not we have toxic masculinity or healthy masculinity. You just have healthy people. And when we get to be who we are, and we get to dance, and we get to sing, and we get to whatever it is that our form of expression is, or whatever it was that gets squashed, then we come alive. And there's nothing more free than that, I don't think. And I know it's a longing I have. I wake up with it every morning.
What has helped you access that?
This is helping me access it. You know, naming it here with you two helps me access it. These kinds of conversations, other men's circles helps me access it. Other kinds of modalities that I've been involved in are like core energetics, which is a somatic-based energetic practice to move energy that's stuck in the body, move it through, and like it gets into that kind of like when I was saying earlier about like all of these different ages are attached to these different emotions that are challenging. Actually connecting to that at a visceral somatic level that's not just in the head. So much of what we do in the therapeutic world, not to put down talk therapy because it's really valuable, I'm in it myself, but it's limiting, right? It has its limitations. It's all intellectualized. Somatic practices has, psychedelic therapy has as well, you know, name that. Experience more myself and go like, that's there. Okay, and it's cool. But it's an ongoing process. I think this is lifetime work, honestly. It took me 53 years to get here, so it's going to keep taking me some time too.
I think that's the key. I think that's the key. And you already alluded to a lot of this, but I think I'm not that interested in the conversation about masculinity. I'm interested in the conversation of how men become better humans. And that allows us to stop arguing what it means to be a man, and we start talking about what it means to be you, what it means to be a healthy, decent, beautiful human being. And that then you do whatever you want with your masculinity, fine. If you get to the core of those parts, if you heal the parts that will make you a better human, then the rest, we will build it together.
There does seem to be a theme in all of these conversations I've been able to have. And then really all the work is back to our humanity. And you're mentioning this like authentic freedom of who I am and all the ways our culture just stunts that. And you're both naming, I think there is some of our own work, but really connection is what I hear in this, right? Efraín, you're saying in these long, I've been doing WhatsApp as well, voice memos with different relationships. And it's such a beautiful, because you're like in stream of consciousness. And then you get to take that and reflect it back. And it's such a beautiful practice.
Yeah. Mini podcasts.
Yeah. You could take all those
little personal podcasts.
But it is the connection, right? Is this actually reconnecting? It's like the practice of connection. And so whether it is a retreat or a long-term, like long relation, like over years of conversation, it seems like that capacity to connect. We're hearing so much about all of this. Men are isolated, they're alone. And, what is that process? What gets us to connect? What has helped you actually either reach out or accept an invitation and make a connection?
You're making me think of a couple of things. The first one is I'm having the realization that this idea that just coming back to self and being your authentic self is not going to take us to where we need to go, because we really need to be connected with others. It's not just about us actually individualizing ourselves and just like self-realizing. It's not. And that takes me to the second idea, which is, and this goes back to a look, just the idea, this has been extremely helpful for me. The idea that we're all going to die. So that kind of makes me not being able to hate anybody really, because I'm like, even when you think about this, like, I'm not going to say names so we don't get political, but these people that we see on the screen and we're like, what are you doing? Why do you have so much money or what? And I'm like, and you're still just going to die, We're all just, and it feels morbid until it becomes very freeing, because then you just start seeing we're all in this together. We're just trying to live the best that we can until we are all gone. Yeah. And there is some sadness, but there is also some beauty in that. And that kind of allows me to feel that connection that's shared. Like, it's going to happen sooner or later. But I do think it's important to say it's not just about me coming back to the 7-year-old Efraín, but it's also Efraín being able to see that as I'm driving in traffic, my job is not just for me to get to where I'm going, it's for all of us to get to where we're going safely. And when we switch that, then, and that's maybe where masculinity sometimes gets in the middle, because then we're competing and I feel humiliated if you move 30 centimeters more than you're supposed to. What are you doing? And I'm like, just go ahead. It's fine. We're all just trying to get home and we're just going to die.
There is a freedom in that too.
Someday.
I have a very similar kind of line of thinking and experiencing that ultimately men's work, whatever that is and means, is legacy work. Is like who and how am I with the world, my relationships, the earth, the animals, just my existence is at the end of it all, because we all are going to die, is what was it? And not in like an accomplishment necessarily, but in our relations, in our impact. I have heard this concept, right, that we die 3 times, that you die when your body dies, and that happens, and then there's a memorial, celebration of life, or a funeral, and then the last time you die is the last time somebody on this planet speaks your name. There's something really beautiful about that for me, about when might that be and why might that be, because I'll have my kids and they'll have their kids, and at some point it'll just dissipate. Gregory, is there anything, what was on your heart that you feel like is really important to also bring to the surface in this conversation?
I want to name, it's really sometimes the tendency to go to the human thing, the humanity thing is an attempt to bypass the patriarchy or the conversations about, we do this with race too, right? It's just like, oh, we're all just the same, we're all humans, right? Can we just get past the race thing, get past color and all those things? And it's like, no. We got to go through it, right? We have to actually go through the middle of it and feel what it's doing to us to get to the place. I think we're doing that here. I do think we need to understand what it is that these systems, because they are systems of oppression. And I mean, Bell Hooks talks about how the target of patriarchy is men, actually, right? Not to say that it isn't about oppressing women, but that's why men are the target, right? You create these boxes and that creates that system of domination and oppression. But that means that men are being harmed too, right? We are being wounded by these things. So to actually feel that, to actually help us then get to the other side of actually something beyond this is possible, something that actually has us recognizing ourselves as human is possible. And to what you were saying, Efraín, about like this not just being about like a personal development project, right, where we're all just trying to better ourselves. I really believe that who we are occurs in the middle, between us. So where we are emerging, we are together here, and the three of us in this conversation, that we are each coming through the middle of that. We are not just like each in our own little individual corners, like lobbing a ball back and forth, right? We're in a dance together. And that's always true wherever we are and in our key relationships. And that's one of the reasons I think they say, like, you're the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right? It's because what is actually cooking in the cauldron between you? And, recognize that's the connection. We live in a culture that in order for domination and control to happen, we have to be disconnected. It's utterly impossible to do that if people are connected. In order to connect people, they have to dehumanize one another, right? And so it's what Efraín's pointing to, the idea of, can we turn on the TV and see the people who most impact us and most terrify us and maybe disgust us, but still recognize that they're actually humans. They too are humans who were once babies, who came into the world with just as much light in their eyes as you did, that grew, and as they were growing had just as much of a desire for freedom as you did. And whatever wounding happened, whatever it was that ended up shaping them to become who they are and doing what they're doing right now, probably would have been what happened to us if we had actually had their exact same experience. And I know that that's a real hard thing to ask for people. I had a conversation with a trans man at the conference that we were at, Vincent, who, when I said that...
What conference was this?
This is this thing, the Big Tent Summit, where a group of folks who were supporting men were getting together. And I said that to him, and he just stopped and he said, I don't know if I'm ready for that. I was like, I get it. Like, I totally get it, And, like, there's something there if we want to get to this place. I think we have to unwind all of this stuff inside of us. And so it's big work, which is why I think it's lifetime work.
I think it's part of my analytical mind, but this work requires an analysis, right, of domination and control of all forms of systems. What's fascinating for me about this exploration to the Men's Healing Network in the last year is that the work is kind of racially siloed, is what I've discovered. The grief work is in kind of a well-to-do white men community. The re-entry work, because who's locked up, right? Men of color, mostly black men are doing the re-entry work. I guess the veteran space, that's ethnic, but there's like black men from Seattle to Tacoma in a kind of a fraternity serving black boys and men. There's a bunch of Chicanos, a group that I'm part of with the National Compadres Network, planning our own retiro, like our own little retreat. And so I'm part of this too, but I do want to bring this analysis of like, that's interesting to me, of just why is this, even in men's work, is this racial siloing that's happening? I'm curious for you, right, and your work, and if we're all in this other DEI field that I think has all of these connections to systems of domination and control, racial patriarchy, all of the rest. I'm curious on the way out here is what do you do with all of that?
I talked to my friend and teacher Aaron Johnson about this on occasion. He's a black-bodied man, and he works with black men, and he works with black men around touch. He has a great project called the Chronically Under Touch Project, among other things that he does. Some great films around that. Dark and Tender is fantastic work. And we've talked about like what is it to bring white men and black men together to do that work. And part of what it takes is a lot of work. Like it takes a lot of work because the legacy of violence between white men and black men is so massive. Right? It typically goes in one direction if you really look at the history of it. And so how to create the safety that allows for that work to happen at the level, the depths it needs to happen, I think that's big work. And it's probably going to happen in small containers. It's not going to happen at a national scale for some time, right? But in small containers of groups of 6 or 8 men who are intentionally working towards that, I think there's a lot of possibility. And hopefully the field data will start showing that, because that is stuff that we're starting to talk about doing.
And how about you, Efraín, navigating your multiple identities, right, in the States and immigrant and all of the other things? Where has that led you?
I think there is value in having spaces where people share identity. What has always bugged me a little bit, or I've always questioned, is particularly coming from Mexico and class being an important component of how Mexican society is organized. Unfortunately, I feel like we over-indexed. I didn't feel comfortable with only leading with people's racial identity or even like sexual orientation as something that would define if somebody was in and out or something, because there is still a lot of class play that is not taken into account and intentionally addressed in our movements. And then it all becomes very binary, talking about the patriarchy. So you're either Latino or not. And if you're not, you don't understand me because you're white. And there is truth to that. I don't want to say, again, Greg, I really love that you brought this idea that why can't we're just human? But I do think there is lack of nuance, and particularly in the United States of America, there is comfort in binaries. There's two parties, there is your friend or an enemy, we're the best and you're not. I challenge us to, as we create whatever kind of space we create, that we have a little bit more of intentionality around class and around other issues. And we also start to understand when people are just sitting in an identity or in a way of seeing themselves and others, to not take their own accountability and do their own work. And this can happen everywhere. It's not particularly for some people or not, but from the people of color side, me as Latino can be like, well, you don't understand me because you're a white man, but then I don't get into what you said. And you're still somebody that said something to me. Depending on the situation, I like creating containers and places where people can actually have that conversation. And also sometimes white folk are like, well, I don't understand because I don't have your experience, which is kind of what I've been trying to frame in this conversation differently, which is straight and gay, we're in the same prison. I see the value in the separation and the understanding, but there is also some caution in me. What is very dangerous, in my opinion, is that I, as a Mexican person that came to the United States with a certain level of privilege because I came to study my master's, assume that I can in any way understand the situation of young Latinos in South LA just because we both speak Spanish and come from the same country. I don't. There has to be a lot more nuance, and just making it binary kind of bothers me.
I feel like I've been learning from the young people, especially as I age, like squash the binaries. Like, just what are we doing? What are we doing anymore? Yeah. Why? And that's what they're just like. What? Why? This is not helping us. It's not.
Some binaries are important to have.
Yeah.
That's the other thing, right? Like sometimes when you need to make decisions, you need yes or no. You want to go to this restaurant or not? No.
We have to start somewhere too, right? And we have to like meet people where they're at in order to get them to walk in the door. It's always a question I'm asking is like, what's going to help a man walk into the circle? Because I want a man to walk into the circle, and so that he can then be challenge himself and go down the path. So I think there's a way in which the spectrum of this conversation, I mean, it's been a wide-ranging conversation, but there's a way in which it kind of in some ways shows the winding nature of this path.
I automatically want to answer your question. It's like to see, to be seen, to be heard, to hear, to connect. Like what is going to lead a man into the circle? Yeah. I'm back to connection. I'm deeply, deeply grateful for this, y'all. Thank you for making time. I'm excited to deepen this relationship, and the fact that I get to meet folks through this process is so beautiful to me. I'm so in love with this project, and anything here on the way out is any last kind of messages that you think it's important for, especially in this kind of very complex conversation we're having, or just examining lots of systems or considering all of that. Any message you want to offer for our listeners?
I don't know if I have a message other than just a deep gratitude for they're listening. A deep gratitude, Vincent, and to get invited to come and speak with you and do this, and a deep gratitude to you, Efraín, for accepting the invitation and then just coming in as wholeheartedly as I knew you would. I feel like I learned something and I see something new in myself, and I hope that is true of anyone listening to this.
Efraín, you want to close this out?
I think Bell Hook's book, The Will to Change, just the title, tells you how we get out of this mess in very few words. So I always just try to invite men to be willing to change. And I really don't need to add much. Whatever that means to you, that you know will get you to better relationships with self and with those who love you and who you love. And I also just want to thank you, Vincent. I think it's a wonderful idea to have somebody invite another person. I really love that. I think it creates lineages, or it creates just like a network that you don't control. And it also takes bravery to do that, because you don't know if half of the people that you're going to be talking to and what they're going to say. So I appreciate it, and I appreciate the space, and I'm grateful for the invitation, and I learned from you both. So thank you.
What a blessing. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to Gregory and Efraín for the conversation that challenged us to think beyond the question of what it means to be a man and toward a deeper question of what it means to be more fully human. We talked about the parts of ourselves we learned to hide, the expectations that shape us as boys and men, and the courage it can take to reclaim what was lost along the way. But we also heard an important reminder. This work does not happen alone. We become more fully ourselves through relationship, by listening, being witness, staying curious, and making room for one another's humanity. Maybe the invitation from this conversation is a simple one. Notice where you're still performing instead of becoming. Notice where you want more freedom, and consider who you might invite into the exploration with you. The Men's Healing Network podcast is made possible with support from the Choice Regional Health Network. The podcast is produced by Tom Kepler with marketing support from D. Enriquez. To learn more about the Men's Healing Network, visit us online at mhn.life. Thank you for listening. Until next time, take care of yourself and take care of each other. Blessings to you and yours.
Ah,